Baptist Church. Welcome to those that are joining us online. Tonight's Bible study, I called it Follow the King. Who wants to follow the King? That's what we're doing, right? Matthew talks about the King. And if you want to, Bobby, you can come out here amongst us. And once we get done, then you can go back in and hit the cancel button. So, it's interesting when you look at the Gospels, and, we're in Matthew 20, starting in verse 1. So I'll give you some time to get there, and you at home, Matthew 20, verse 1. But I'll tell you a little bit about the gospel, some trivia. You want some Bible trivia tonight? So the Gospels, each one of the Gospels, they're eyewitness accounts of the same event, right? So it would be like four of us witnessed something happen outside, a shooting, an accident. Of course, the Gospels are written something good, right? And then the people would come and say, what happened? And all four of us would give our story of what happened, right? And if you're into cars and the car accident was a Mustang, you might say, oh, Mustang crashed into somebody. If I'm not into cars, I might say there was a car driving real fast. But we're talking about the same thing, right? And so the Gospels do that about the life and the ministry of Christ and the things that happen surrounding his earthly ministry. And so each one of them pulls out a specific aspect of Jesus. And I love that because as we study through the Gospels, we get to know Jesus a little bit more. And Matthew brings out the fact that Jesus was king, right? King of kings and Lord of lords, right? And so that's why we call this study of Matthew, Follow the King. And so Matthew has a genealogy, doesn't it? At the beginning of it. Sometimes we just kind of skip over that genealogy instead of read all those tough names. There's beauty, there's gold in that genealogy, I want to tell you. But the reason Matthew has a genealogy is because the heritage, the lineage of a king is really important, isn't it? Right? Now, Mark talks about Christ as a servant. Right? And when we think of king, let's go back to the king for a second. What animal comes to mind? Yeah, and Jesus is called the Lion of the tribe of Judah, isn't he? And so we can think of Matthew as king and lion. And then Mark talks about Jesus as a servant. Was Jesus a servant? Yeah, he said, I didn't come to be served, but to serve. Right? When you talk about following Christ, he said, if you want to be first, right, then you'll serve. We'll read that tonight. Hooray! Right. If you want to be first, you have to be last. And so he talks about Jesus as a servant. What animal comes to mind when you think of servant? A snake? No. Does snake serve us? Not a serpent, a servant. Right? Maybe we think of an ox, don't we? Right? Don't oxen serve? So Mark, you can think of servant and ox. And interestingly, there's no genealogy in Mark. Now they're talking about the same thing, right? But when Matthew writes it down, he says, here's Jesus. Jesus was the son of, the son of, the son of. Mark doesn't do that. Mark doesn't give a genealogy because a servant in those days, their heritage didn't matter. In fact, they probably wouldn't have even known what it was. Now, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, what was Luke? Does anybody know what his profession was? He was a doctor, right? Luke is the only gospel writer that wasn't Jewish. He was a Gentile. And Luke talks about Christ as a man. Now, would we say it's true? All those things are true about Christ, right? He's a king, he's a servant, and he became man. And so Luke's gospel, when you read it, the picture you get of Christ is as a man. And there is a genealogy in Luke, right? And so because the genealogy of a man was important in those days. In fact, it was important in order to trace their Jewish heritage. And then the last one is John. How does John depict Jesus? What's left? What's left, right? We have him as a king, God, right? We have him a king, a servant, a man, and now John, the last one, I would say the best for last. John talks about him as God. And when you read the Gospel of John, that's what you see as the divinity of Christ. And there's no genealogy in the Gospel of John because God has no genealogy, right? He is unbegotten. He's always existed. He's the only thing that's always existed. Everything else has a beginning. But God has no beginning. He's always been and always will be. And I think that's really cool. So that's a little bit of gospel trivia as we were waiting for everybody to get here about the Gospels. And so we're in the Gospel of Matthew. This is a decidedly Jewish gospel, right? Matthew is writing to Jewish people. And so lots of the stuff that we've talked about, right, makes sense in the Jewish culture. And it'll be a little bit different. You know, Mark is that way as well. Luke and John are different. And we'll see that. I think if you guys don't mind, that's what we'll do. We'll just do this as a study of the Gospels. So once we get finished with Matthew, we'll go into Mark. The next ones ought to be a little quicker because we can go faster through the areas that are the same. And so today we're in Matthew 20. Matthew 20, starting in verse 1. Now, does anybody? These are the tests, right? What did we study last week? Do what? The letter P? Is that what we did? I can't remember. So you just glance a little bit back in chapter 19. We studied the fact that Jesus said, they were talking to Jesus about the rich man, right? The rich man came to Jesus and said, what must I do to be saved? And he said, follow the commandments. And we talked about those commandments. And he said, well, I've done that since the days of my youth. And he said, in that case, sell all of your possessions and follow me. And not everybody's called. This is a perception that I want you to try to get your minds around, right? Not everybody's called to sell all their possessions and follow Christ. That was something he said specifically to this man. But what a beautiful calling that would be. How much closer would you be to Christ than by doing something like that, giving everything up so that you can follow him? Now, it requires us to give him our lives, but he doesn't require us to give everything up, only to give everything over. Make sense? But some of us, he requires to give everything up, and that's what happened with the rich man. But the rich man, he said, no, I can't do it. He went away sad, it said, because he had great possessions. And the reason Jesus said that to him was because he knew that the man would hold on. He knew his heart. He knew that he would hold on to it. And so then he told his disciples that it's easier for a rich man it's easier for a camel to get through the eye of the needle than a rich man to get into heaven. And then they said to him, well, Jesus, Master, what do we get since we did give up everything to follow you, right? And that's when he gave us this thing about the first shall be last and the last shall be first. He said, verily I say unto you that those of you that followed me in the regeneration, when the Son of Man shall sit on the throne, you shall sit on 12 thrones and rule as well. Everyone that has forsaken houses and brothers and sisters, that stuff will be returned to you tenfold, right, or 100-fold. Then it says, but many that are first shall be last, and that are last shall be first. That's the context in which we're coming into Matthew 20. And he says, for the kingdom of heaven is like, and you remember I told you there was no chapter divisions, there was no verse numbers in the original writings. When Matthew wrote this down, these two things flowed right into each other. So I always sometimes I like to start with sometimes the chapter divisions actually divide the concepts. But in many cases it doesn't. Here's one of those cases, right? So Jesus, as he's talking, it's all in red. He says, many that are first shall be last, and last shall be first. For the kingdom of heaven is like unto a man that is a householder, which went out early in the morning to hire laborers for his vineyard. Now, as we get into the story, it's one of my favorite stories in all of the Bible. As we get into it, I want to ask you this. Have you ever been disappointed? Right? Has somebody ever disappointed you? Lots of times that disappointment comes because you were expecting one thing and got something else, right? And then what do we say? That's not fair. Have you ever been disappointed because of what someone else got? I remember when I got a job right out of the Navy, the job that we got was $30,500 a year. That was the paycheck. So I got out of the Navy, and then I went to college in Arkansas, and then I was offered a job in insurance. It was $30,500 a year. And I left college. I was in pre-med. I was going to be a doctor. And I left college to go into the insurance business for $30,000 a year. I couldn't be happier. When we went to our orientation, they told us that it wasn't a salary position. It was a guaranteed hourly. So you guys know the difference between a salary position and an hourly position, right? If you get paid hourly, you don't get paid if you don't work, but you get paid for every hour that you work. And then if you work more than a certain number of hours, you get overtime. That's pretty cool, right? And now that overtime is going to be tax-free because the big, beautiful bill was passed. Well, if you're salary, you just get the same amount of paycheck, right? So if you leave work at 2 o'clock in the afternoon because everything was done for the day, you still get the same paycheck. However, if you work 80 hours a week, you don't get any overtime, right? You get paid what you get paid, your salary. Well, when we got this job, right, and you usually do, when we got this job for a salary, what we thought was a salary of $30,500 a year, what they told us, it was actually guaranteed hourly. So it was the best of both worlds. And what they said is we're paying you for 60 hours of work, guaranteed. So if you work 20 hours, you still got paid for 60. If you work 60, you got paid for 60. But if you work 70, you got paid $10 of overtime. And in order to calculate the overtime, they took $30,500 and divided it by 60 hours a week, and it came out to like $15.50 an hour. And one of the guys that was in the group all of a sudden became disappointed. All of us were talking about how great this job was, right? And how great the pay was. But as soon as he saw it broken down into hourly, which wasn't what we got paid by the hour, by the way, it was just how they calculated the overtime. Now, all of a sudden, he was disappointed. What changed? Did the amount of money that we got paid changed? No. The only thing that changed was his perception, wasn't it? And that's what happens to us when we get jealous or when we get disappointed because of something somebody else gets, right? When you get a job, do you negotiate the salary? Right? And then you agree on the salary, right? And then you go to work. What if you find out somebody else was a better negotiator? They're doing the same job, but they get $1 more an hour, right? You're going, wait a minute. Now I'm disappointed. I was happy yesterday, but because of that's what's happening here. And so it's a good lesson for us in our life. So Jesus said this, for the kingdom of heaven is like unto a man that is an householder, which went out early in the morning to hire laborers for his vineyard. And I always think about those places. You seen those day laborer places? People go out there and wait for somebody to come get them for some work, and you can go hire people for yard work. I've thought about doing it before, but I've never done it. Or if you need help, we thought about it today, right? And Bobby came and helped us out a little bit because Tommy, the work that wasn't suitable for Tommy and Luke was sick. And so JJ was doing a roof all by himself. And so I'm like, well, where are the day laborer places, right? We'll just drive up and see if there's a couple of guys that are waiting for work. That's what it reminds me of here, right? So he goes out to the day labor place, and when he had agreed with the laborers for a penny a day, he sent them into his vineyard. So you get the picture, right? He drives up and he talks to the people that are out there waiting for work, and he says, I want you to come work in my vineyard today, and I'll pay you a penny for the day. Now, a penny, of course, is our translation, right? Don't think of the value of a penny today, right? We just say penny, but it was probably a shekel or something like that. And they agreed. So they said, yes, sir, that's great. Got in the car, and they went to the vineyard. Then he went out about the third hour of the day. And this is beautiful. I love this. This is what I love about our global ministries, because we don't see this. What's the third hour of the day? Does anybody know? It's 9 o'clock, right? Because the first hour of the day starts at 6. So in places like Africa where we go, that's how they tell time. If you're going to say 9 o'clock, the words, if you translate it literally, mean the third hour, right? And so you got to start at 6, and that's how it goes. So about the third hour of the day at 9 o'clock, he saw others standing idle in the marketplace. Now look at what the difference is here. He went out looking for workers for the vineyard at 6, and he found a couple people. He agreed. They negotiated their salary. He put them to work. Is he looking for more people to put to work? He's not. At this point, he's just wandering around. But when he went out, he saw others that were standing idly by. And he said, you know what? I bet they could use some work. And so he goes up to them and said unto them, go ye also into the vineyard, and whatsoever is right I will give you. And so they went on their way. Now again, about the 6th hour and the 9th hour, he did likewise. And I can imagine if he's anything like the way I think, right? He probably thought after he happened to see the idle guys at the 9th hour or the 3rd hour, he probably thought, well, let me go see if anybody else is out there. And so he went out there again and he found more people and he did the same thing. You go into my vineyard too. He didn't need all those people to work, but he saw that people were needed, that people were in need. And so he gave them some work. And he did that at the 6th hour and he did that at the 9th hour. And about the 11th hour, he went out and found others standing idle and said unto them, why stand ye here all day idle? And they said unto him, because no man has hired us. So he said unto them, go ye also into the vineyard, and whatsoever is right, ye shall receive. Now, how many work hours are left in the 11th hour of the day? What's that? Not many, right? Probably one. I would imagine it's 12 hours. So he hired people in the morning that worked all day, and then throughout the day, he hired people that worked till the end of the day. Verse 8, so when he was come, the Lord of the vineyard saith unto his steward, call the laborers here and give them their hire, beginning from the last unto the first. So hope I'm not going too slow on this, but I just love the story, right? So he's hired some people in the morning, some people mid-morning, some people early afternoon, some people late afternoon, and some people in the evening. Of that group of people, who's getting paid first? The people that got hired in the 11th hour. They're the ones that are coming up for their pay. And when they came up, that were hired about the 11th hour, they received every man a penny. Now, who remembers what the people that were hired in the morning negotiated for their daily salary? A penny. Now, what do you think those people in the morning were thinking at this moment when they see the guys in the 11th hour come up and they get a penny? What do you think was in their mind? No, they weren't thinking that yet. They were probably thinking something else. Yeah. Oh, I can't wait to see what I get. They got paid a penny for only 1 hour. That means I'm going to probably get 12 pennies. That's what I would imagine they're thinking, right? Now, some of them might have been, right? That depends on how our outlook on life is, right? Some of them were probably thinking, ooh, look at that, right? I can't wait to see how much we get. Others were like, they better not give me that, right? That better not be I'm telling you right now, that better not be what he gives me. But they were still, both of those people were still thinking they were going to get more. They just approached it differently, right? One person was probably saying, oh, this is great. The other's like, you better not do that to me. Let's see what happens. And when they had received it, let me see. Yeah, so when that came that were hired in the 11th hour, they received every man a penny. But when the first came, they supposed that they should have received more, but they likewise received every man a penny. What did they agree to work for? What's changed? Nothing, right? Except for their perception, right? Somebody negotiated better, probably, what they're thinking. When they had received it, they murmured against the good man of the house. Notice that they didn't go to him, right? If you were really dissatisfied, what would have been the proper thing to do? To go to the good man of the house. But they murmured with each other. Can you believe what happened to us? Can you believe he did that? And I always like to act that out, right? You got to have the hand on the hip. Do you believe what he just did? Now, can he remedy anything if they're murmuring amongst themselves? That's why Jesus says, don't complain, right? In some sense of the word, if we're complaining, we're arguing that God didn't do what was right. If we're complaining about anything in our life, we're saying, God, you don't know what you're doing. I'm not happy, God, with what you did. That's what complaining means. Now, all of us do it, but I hope from now on, when you do it, you have something in the back of your mind that says, now, wait a minute, right? God knows what he's doing. Even if I don't like it, I know he knows what he's doing. But they were just complaining, and that doesn't do anything, right? I love that when somebody says, I can't complain. How are you today? I can't complain. I always respond with, wasn't doing good anyway, right? Because complaining doesn't do anything. But that's what they're doing. They're complaining. They're murmuring amongst themselves against the good man of the house, saying, these last have wrought but 1 hour, and thou hast made them equal unto us, which have borne the burden and the heat of the day. But he answered one of them and said, friend, I do thee no wrong. Did you not agree with me for a penny? So did he do, before we read on, do you guys think he did them wrong? To pay the people that only worked an hour the same that he paid the people that worked all day? Right? They agreed to work all day for a penny. There's absolutely nothing wrong with him paying a penny for them working all day long. The only thing that's different is their perception, because now somebody else got something that they didn't. And that was 11 hours off, right? So he says to them, take that thine is, and go thy way, and I will give unto this last, even as unto thee. And then he asked them a question. Is it not lawful? Now, you remember, I told you that Matthew is talking to Jews, right? And what was in the mind of most Jews? The law of Moses, right? That's how they governed their lives, was by the law of Moses. Now, Jesus came and changed all that, but that's still fresh in their minds. And so he says to them this question, is it not lawful for me to do what I will with mine own? Can I do with what's mine whatever I want to do? How could anything I do with what's mine be unfair to you? Is thine eye evil because I am good? Right? Look at the perspective. This is why I love this. They're upset because they feel they were shorted when they got exactly what they agreed to. So what they're really mad about is that he was generous to someone else. That's what they're mad about. And he says, isn't it lawful for me to do whatever I want with what's mine? Am I evil now because I do good? So the last shall be first, and the first last. For many are called, but few are chosen. And that's the difference, right? So now we can see a physical play out of what the last is first and the first is last is. Because who got paid first? The last, right? And then it says, many are called and few are chosen. So lots of those guys were called. But in the group of those, the only ones that were chosen were the ones that didn't murmur, right? That saw goodness for goodness sake, right? What's that song? Is that a Christmas song? You better watch out for goodness sake, right? I forget whatever that is, right? But yeah. Right. Right. I love it when that happens. So that's how do we apply this to our salvation? Now remember what just happened, right? That the rich man went away rich, but he's sad because he didn't think he could be saved. And the disciples who had given up everything said, well, what do we get? That man's going away sad, but he's rich. What's in it for us? Now, I don't think it was in a murmuring way. I think it was in an honest way. And that's what Jesus said. The last shall be first and the first shall be last. So would we think it's unfair if somebody parties and doesn't care about God and uses others and does whatever they want, and then on their deathbed, they confess Christ and they really accept him? Would we see that's not fair? I've lived my whole life in faith. I didn't do those things that other people did, right? If we did say that, then it shows our heart like these people, right? We should be happy that they're saved, even if it happens at the 11th hour. Because in reality, what Jesus is saying here is, even if you feel like you've given up everything, you've given up nothing. Because what you're going to get in return is 100-fold what you have here, right? And so our attitude shouldn't be, well, I want to be like them, right? Our attitude should be gratitude for God's goodness. Amen? That's a cool story, right? I love that story. All right, then Jesus, going up to Jerusalem in verse 17, took 12 disciples apart in the way and said unto them, Behold, we go up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man shall be betrayed unto the chief priests and unto the scribes, and they shall condemn him to death. Who's the Son of Man? Yeah. I was thinking about you, Tommy, right? Whoso is it? What is it? Yeah, right. Who speaketh? Who is it of whom you speaketh thou, right? If I was his disciples, I'd probably be saying to Jesus, who are you talking about, right? He's talking about himself in the third person, isn't he? Right? He said, when the Son of Man shall be betrayed by the chief priests and the scribes. Who were the chief priests and the scribes? Were they Gentiles or Jewish? They were Jewish, right? They were Jewish leaders. Was Jesus a Gentile or a Jew? He was Jewish, right? He said, I came unto my own, and my own received me not. That's who betrayed him, was the leaders of the Jews. And he's the king of the Jews. In fact, the Gentile king said, I don't have anything against this man. You remember that story, right? When he was standing up there and he said, look, I don't have anything against this. His wife said, you better not do anything against him. I feel like it's going to go bad for you, right? And he said, I don't have anything against him. So there's nothing we can charge him with. So he turned him over to Pontius Pilate, who was a leader of the Jews. And the way the Roman society was set up that day, it would be like there was the leader of Rome, but within Rome was the Jewish society, and there was a leader over the Jews. Now the Jews were still subject to Roman rule, but the Roman emperor allowed them to govern themselves. So they could do within their community whatever they felt was right. Now, if they broke Roman law, they would have to come under the magistrate of Rome. But he said, look, they haven't broken any Roman laws. He hasn't, right? What was he being accused of? Come on, you guys got to know this. What were they accusing Jesus of? Blasphemy, right? So all these Roman leaders were in front of the emperor of Rome or the magistrate or whoever it was, right? It was Agrippa. Is that who it was? Yeah. And they were saying, this man blasphemed. And he said, that's not a law in Rome. Pretty much what he said, I don't care about that, right? If you think it's bad, then you take care of it. Now, that shows the separation that existed there. Remember when somebody said to Jesus, I love all these questions, right? They said to him, pretty much in our language, it would be when we tithe 10%, is that after taxes or before taxes? Right? And Jesus said, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and render unto God what is God's. Right? So basically what he said is it's before taxes, right? If you want to give 10%, and I'm not saying that tithing, technically when you look at it, tithing is what we owe God, 10%. Anything above that is what we give God. But in the New Testament, it says give with a glad heart, right? In the Old Testament, they were required to give 10%. In the New Testament, what he said is give with a glad heart. I don't want anybody to give reluctantly because what I want is love, not obedience. That's what he said, right? Those gifts don't mean anything to me if they're given in a begrudging manner. What I want is your heart. So if you have a heart to give, then give. But what Jesus was saying there is it's 10% of your total, right? You give 10% to God and you give 3% to Caesar. But you see the separation there, right? Those two don't. God doesn't operate under the rule of Caesar like the Jews did, right? It's the other way around, actually, right? Caesar operates under it, but Caesar doesn't recognize that. So you can see the separation. And so what Jesus is saying here is that the chief priests and the scribes, the leaders of the Jews, even though the Romans aren't going to convict him, he's going to be turned over to the leaders of the Jews, and they're going to condemn him to death. And then they're going to deliver him to the Gentiles who are going to mock him and scourge him and crucify him. And on the third day, he shall rise again. So it was the Jewish leaders that convicted him, but it was the Roman government that crucified him. This is what he told his disciples. In Matthew, we'll read more in the other Gospels about this story. But in Matthew, it just records that he took his disciples with him and told them that. Do you think they understood what he was saying? No. In fact, at times before, Peter said, "Stop it, Lord, that's not going to happen." And Jesus said, "Get behind me, Satan," right? Why? Now, that's the whole reason he was here. Thank God that happened to him, right? I mean, I hate that it happened to him. And I looked at that a little differently in my life when my mentor, a man who's gone to be with God, I've talked about him before, his name was Pastor Virgil Farr. And when that movie came out, The Passion of Christ, we couldn't wait to see it with Mel Gibson. And we were at their house and we were asking him and his family, let's rent, we did movie nights on Saturday nights between Memorial Day and Labor Day. Every Saturday we showed a movie at the church. And so we were asking, should we show The Passion of Christ? And Virgil said, I can't watch that. He said, I can't. It would hurt me too much to watch him go through that. And I thought, wow, would we watch it that way? Knowing that we were part of the reason that he went through it? That should hurt us, right? And Jesus told his disciples this is what was going to happen, but they didn't understand it. That's what it tells us in the scripture. And they were saying things like, no. Now, if I were to come to you or one of you come to me and said, I feel like tomorrow I'm going to get beat up, we would want to hear, no, all right, I got your back. I'll go with you. How many times have we done that when hope this doesn't sound misogynistic or sexist, but if a lady's afraid to walk to her car at night, wouldn't you appreciate a guy that said, I'll walk you to your car? Right? I feel like something bad's going to happen. Don't worry, I'll go with you so nothing happens. Oh, thank you. That would be great for us. But that was the reason he came. He wasn't afraid of what was going to happen. He wasn't saying, I think if I walk out to my car, it's dangerous. No, he was saying, this is why I came. What's about to happen, this is what's about to happen. And this is what I've been telling you is the whole purpose. And in fact, he called it the joy that was set before him. But it doesn't record any of their reaction here. But it will in other gospels, so we'll get there. Then it says in verse 20, then came to him the mother of Zebedee's children with her sons, worshiping him and desiring a certain thing of him. And he said unto her, what wilt thou? So the mother of two of his disciples, which is just beautiful, right? I hope you guys see this stuff when you read these stories. Because when I picture Jesus and his disciples, I picture him walking all over the known world at the time. But in reality, there was moments when he visited their families. There was a time they came off of the mission field because Peter's wife was sick. Jesus cares about us. He cares about the things we care about, right? He's got a mission, and he's got a mission for us. But it doesn't mean he doesn't care about things that we care about. And I don't believe this was the first time Zebedee's mother, or Zebedee's wife, I guess, right? The sons of Zebedee, their mother, probably wasn't the first time that she met Jesus. Because when she came to him, she said, I have something to ask you. And he said, what is it? Isn't that beautiful? It's such a graceful response. He didn't say, now what? Right? That's how we respond sometimes. What do you want now? He said, what is it? She's saying unto him, grant that these my two sons may sit one on thy right hand and one on thy left hand in thy kingdom. Now she has to believe what? That there's a kingdom. Right? Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. When Jesus got here, that's what people were preaching, right? Repent. Why? Was John the Baptist said that? Repent, for the kingdom of heaven is near. And then the mother of the sons of Zebedee comes and says, will you grant that one of my sons is on your left and one of my sons is on the right? Right? We might. How might we respond in a moment like that? Are you crazy, lady? There's 12, right? Why are your sons so special? I don't know how we would respond, but Jesus is brilliant. Jesus answered and he said, you know not what you ask. And that's so true, right? What was she seeing as the right hand and the left hand of Jesus? How was she viewing those positions? Yeah, the most honored, the most important, the most prestigious. Now, this all fits into the story of the last shall be first and the first shall be last, right? How many people want to be pastors, right? We see this all over in our ministries in the globe. How many people want to be pastors because of the prestige? Now, we might not see that here because a pastor in the U.S. doesn't have the prestige that they do elsewhere. But in some of the places we go, a pastor is the most important job there, right? When you tell people I'm a pastor, they say, oh. Now, it happens in some cases, when people find out you're I'll never forget when, I was trying to minister to somebody and he took me into a house that I probably shouldn't have been in, right? Tori told me at the time, don't do that, Uncle Tim. But when I was there was, drugs in the house. And as we were talking, it came up that I was a pastor, and the young guy that was rolling what they call primos, he wasn't paying attention to what we were doing, and they said, yeah, he's a pastor. And he goes, you're a pastor? And I said, yeah. And he goes, oh, no. And he picked his stuff up and he walked out. So at least he had enough respect for me not to do that right there in front of me, right? But that's what we think sometimes. But that's not the way it is, right? If you're going to serve God, how do you do that best? Do what? Yeah, pray for people is one way, right? The way we serve God is to serve others. That's what he did, right? And so he says to this lady, you don't know what you're asking for, because those positions aren't reserved for somebody to be honored, to be served, to be respected. That's not what that is. Now, she wouldn't have known that. She wasn't. Maybe she went with them in some places, right? But she wasn't part of the group that went everywhere, I don't believe. But he says, you know not what you ask. And then he says this, are you able to drink of the cup that I shall drink of? And to be baptized with the baptism that I will be baptized with? Now, I don't know whether he asked her that or if he asked her sons, because I imagine she probably grabbed her sons by the hands, right, and said, come with me. I don't know, right? I want my two sons. They were older, so maybe she wasn't doing that. But they were probably there with her when she was asking. And so maybe he looked at them and said, are you able to drink the cup that I'm about to drink? What was the cup? Yeah, right? You remember in the Garden of Gethsemane, he said, Father, if there be any other way, take this cup from me. Was there another way? It must not have been, right? Because if God was going to answer any prayer, it would have been that of his son. And yet he didn't take that away. That was the only way. And the cup that he was talking about is the cup of God's wrath, right? We think that he was sweating blood because of the physical suffering that he was about to go through. He was whipped, he was beaten, he was mocked, he was scourged, and then he was crucified. Now that would be enough to make me sweat drops of blood. But it didn't bother Jesus at all. What bothered Jesus is that he was about to take upon himself the sin of the world. That was so much more devastating to him physically than the beatings and the scourgings, right? The wrath of God was way worse than the wrath of man. It says in the Gospels, why are you afraid of a man that can only kill the body? You should be afraid of the one that can kill the body and the soul. And all that physical stuff that was done to him was just to the body. But taking on the sin of the world, he who had no sin became sin so that we didn't have to suffer in that way. He said, can you drink that cup? Can you be baptized with what I'm baptized with? And they said, I did. We are able. They didn't know what they were saying, did they? Then he saith unto them, ye shall drink indeed my cup, and be baptized with what I will be baptized by. But to sit on my right hand and on my left hand is not mine to give, but it shall be given to them for whom it is prepared for my Father. So whoever is going to be on the right hand and the left hand. In fact, where's Jesus right now? He's on the right hand of God. So who's on Jesus' left hand? That's God, right? But he said, whoever's going to be there, that's going to be determined by my Father. And when the 10 had heard this, how come it wasn't 12? That's right, because of the two sons of Zebedee, right? When the 10 had heard this, they were moved with indignation against the two brethren. Doesn't that sound like those people that were hired in the morning? But Jesus called them unto him, and he said, you know that the princes of the Gentiles exercise dominion. This is the lesson of this story. He said, you know that the princes of the Gentiles exercise dominion over the Gentiles. And you know that they that are great exercise authority over the Gentiles. But he said to him, and I imagine this was done so gently and compassionately. He said to them, but it shall not be so among you. What he's telling them is you shouldn't be seeking the places of honor. That's not how it should be among you. He said, but it shall not be so among you, but whosoever will be great among you. Who wants to be great? It's all right. You can raise your hand. I want to be great. Whosoever shall be great among you. The way to do that is let him be your minister. Think about that. He said, for the Gentiles, those princes exercise dominion. What does that mean, right? They don't care about their subjects. Now, some of them might, but in general, they don't. They exercise their authority over them. They tell them what to do. Those are subjects that have no value other than to carry out the orders of the king. That's the way it is in front of the Gentile world, but that's not the way it should be among you. If you want to be great, if you desire greatness, the way to do that in the kingdom of heaven is to not be their authority, but to be their minister. And whosoever will be chief among you, let him be your servant. Even as the Son of Man came not to be ministered to, but to minister, and to give his life a ransom for many. Oh man, that's amazing, right? Now, all of us want to be thanked for what we do. All of us want to be recognized for what we do. All of us want to have impact on those around us. Well, if that's really what you want, that's the way to do it. Minister. You don't have to be a minister in order to minister. We're all ministers, right? You can minister daily at work. Has anybody had a coworker have a bad day? Nobody had a coworker have a bad day? That's an opportunity to minister. Has anybody had a coworker suggest doing something that wasn't right? That's an opportunity to minister. Even as the Son of Man came not to be ministered unto, but to minister and to give his life a ransom for many. And then just a couple more verses, and then we'll go eat. Janie made us a great pasta salad tonight. And as they departed from Jericho, a great multitude followed him. And behold, two blind men sitting by the wayside, when they heard that Jesus passed by, cried out, saying, have mercy on us, O Lord, thou Son of David. These guys are blind. They heard that he was coming by, and they started yelling, right? Have mercy on us, O Lord. But the multitude rebuked them because they should hold their peace, right? So Jesus is walking down the road. People are lined probably, right? But a bunch of people, a multitude are following him. And then all these sudden, these two guys start yelling, have mercy on us. And they're like, quiet down, right? Be quiet. I think that's funny. I don't know why, but I do, right? Two blind men sitting there. The other multitude rebuked them because they should hold their peace. But they cried even the more. They got louder. Have mercy on us, O Lord, thou Son of David. And so Jesus stood still, and he called to them, and he said, what will ye that I shall do unto you? These were men in need, right? Are we people in need? What should we do? Despite the multitudes telling us to keep our peace, we should cry out to the Lord. Lord, have mercy on us. Because what the Lord did was stopped. And what did he do? What do you want? And they said, would we be able to answer that question? How often have we cried out to the Lord, have mercy on me, O Lord? We've prayed at night, Lord, help me. What if he showed up and said, what can I do for you? What would you say? Would you have an answer to that question? I pray that you do. These two men, they said unto him, Lord, that our eyes might be open. Just open our eyes. So Jesus had compassion on them, and he touched their eyes, and immediately their eyes received sight. And then what did they do? They followed him. I don't know about you, but chapter 20 is an amazing chapter. I hope that I portrayed it rightly to you tonight. I hope this was useful to you in some way. And I hope it just caused you to think about how you live your life, right? It's not about what we can't do. It's about what we should do, right? Do we want to do those things we should? And ultimately, we're saved by faith through grace, right? Not by our works. But I hope we want to live a life that's pleasing to God. I hope that when we find those areas in our life when we can't see clearly, we cry out, Lord, have mercy on me. And when the world tells us to shut up, we get louder. Lord, have mercy. Because I know one thing for sure, and that's the Lord doesn't fail. Amen. All right. Let's close with a prayer, and then we'll go back for fellowship. And Bobby, if you want to, go shut down the thing. Thank you for that. Oh, yes. Yeah, so Michael, you remember Michael? He came and visited with us one time with his girlfriend. He had a seizure.
They said that he has epilepsy. He's having, I think, epilepsy stress seizures.
Stress seizures.